When the Phone Rings is absolutely my K-drama obsession right now. I've finished watching episodes 3 and 4, and so much has happened since. This show is so incredibly addictive, and we got a lot of reveals and a lot of new plot developments in these latest episodes, and I really want to get into it so much more. Hi, I'm Monique. I am the host of Off by Purple Art podcast, where I talk to you about K-dramas, C-dramas, BTS, and so much more. Going into When the Phone Rings, this is going to be a spoilery podcast, so I'm going to be talking about episodes 3 and 4, so if you want to go in completely blind, maybe watch those episodes and come back in for the discussion. Episode 3, I love the tension between the male and female lead, I have to say. Hong Hee-joo in particular, I really love this character. I think even though she makes some choices that really gets under my skin, and a lot of those choices that she makes definitely gets addressed in episode 4. But episode 3, one of my big gripes with her was the handling of that burner phone that came from the kidnapper with the whole voice modulator. I was getting very tense and very nervous because of how casual she is with it. And in the midst of their sexual tension and the male lead getting in her face often because he is investigating with his team now with all the recent incidents that have been piling up against them, with the carjacking, the kidnapping, and the kidnapper compromising the building that him and his team worked out of and causing that explosion, and it coinciding with a case of an arsonist kind of going around the city creating havoc and mayhem. You know, the male lead is very high strung at this point, and I feel like the female lead, Hee-joo, is not helping matters. She makes a lot of rookie mistakes, but it fits with her character. She is completely in over her head. But I loved the few moments of tension we do get, even if they are not the most romantic. It's the sexual tension that's really selling me with the show. The show keeps it very exciting. So him confronting her, you know, shoving her up onto that table and starting to get at that skirt because he wants to see whether the mole matches up to what his wife looks like, because their marriage has basically been arranged. They haven't really been intimate with one another. They've been dancing very lightly around one another, and it's only now that through these circumstances that they're really starting to get in each other's face, and they're starting to peel back the layers of who they are as people and what they really feel about each other. And him having to come to terms with what he thought at the time was him basically having to deal with his wife potentially having an affair was mind-boggling to him, because nothing about how the kidnapper moves makes any sense, and especially with her involvement and the burner phone. So her taking those really racy, sexy photos of herself and taking that provocative picture of her thigh was really scrambling with his brain chemistry. So him hoisting her up on the table and yanking that skirt back, like, it's just so full with tension, but also it reminds me that the male lead isn't always the nicest guy. He is very cold and he's very hot depending on the scenario. So he's not the perfect male lead. He's not. I'm going to put that out there. As much as I think the character's hot, the actor portraying this character is hot, but not all of his actions are justifiable, and he's definitely made a lot of missteps in their marriage, even if it was a contract marriage, a marriage of convenience, because of the aligning of their two very powerful families. He still has fault to blame for their communication breakdown. And the female lead, I'm definitely more on her side and her corner, and I understand where all this is coming from, and we definitely get more insights into her psyche as episode 3 goes on, and you get to see just what a piece of shit her mom is, and that her mom is like a major antagonist. And it was really brought to light because then we get the reveal in episode 3 that the reason why she developed this selective mutism was because of this traumatic event that happened to her when she was young, and she ended up being relatively unscathed in the matter, but her mom forces her to keep mute because of her mom's social climbing ways and her lack of empathy towards her daughters in general, and just the way she moves through life. She's just all about being a social climber, and that's the end all be all. And to hell with everything else. And because of this triggered this going into her adulthood, even though we as the audience knows that she has been able to regain her ability to speak, to make noise, and that she is protecting herself by continuing to carry on with this selective mutism, which I thought was really, really interesting, just getting that more insight. Definitely, I suspected in episode 3 that the male lead couldn't be that stupid and knew what was going on with the female lead and her involvement with the kidnapper. Like, they're obviously not working in tandem together. She just saw an opportunity to use it to her advantage, to wedge a further divide between the two of them and potentially use this very traumatic, frightening situation as a way to get a divorce, to get that process going. And she's unfortunately in over her head. But I knew that there was a lot of signs in episode 3 that the male lead was catching on to what was going on, but he just needed a few more pieces of evidence to really seal the deal. And I love the offhand comment that he makes to her while simultaneously flirting with her. That whole moment where he takes his thumb and wipes some residue of the beer off of her mouth, because she was kind of having her crash out moment after that really weird incident in the parking garage. She was getting really high strung. Again, she's entangled in this web with this kidnapper and this burner phone. And the male lead comes in, she's really freaking out, and she's like, yeah, I'm going to get some beer and some ice cream. And male lead says, no, I'm gonna do that. Gets her the stuff. And then as she's drinking, she's not always as refined, I guess, he in his mind and in his family's mind, and he wipes that residue, that little bit of foam from the beer off her mouth, and says a very seductive way, you're always so clumsy at what you do. And it's not just a throwaway line. That was a very pointed piece of dialogue to say, I'm onto you more than you think. And I would think with his history and him working as like a hostage negotiator, him and his time in the political office and being a spokesperson and dealing with all these high pressured, high density situations, he should be able to piece a lot of these pieces of information together quite easily. Because Hee-joo is not doing a great job in espionage and being subtle and pulling off this whole ruse. She's not being very subtle at all. And things really, really, really get to a head at the climax of this episode, and with the whole abduction of her father, who is currently in the nursing home that she's taking care after. That was really tense for me. For one, it's just crazy that any nurse or caregiver or aide would take someone outside who has dementia and gets prone to confusion very easily and literally leave them outside and say, oh, I forgot something, I'll be right back, and kind of turn off, which is very sus to me. But I understand that was a plot point that was needed to introduce the kidnapper / stalker into the mix again and racket the tension levels of the episode. And sure as hell did, because I was like, what kind of crazy lax ass nursing home is this? But anyway, the father being left and that whole interaction back and forth between the kidnapper and Hee-joo was so incredibly tense, and the whole reveal of the blood and the napkin and the teeth, and him saying, whatever you're doing, because you seem to have the same goals as we do. So whoever is the major puppet master who's orchestrating all these events, it's clearly not just a one-man job. As far as taking down the male lead, there's several different entities at play. At least I am hoping that's what the show is trying to convey to us. And it was just another slap to Hee-joo's face to know that no matter how slick you're being, you're not being slick enough, and you're playing with fire. And they will use her father in addition as a chess piece to create havoc in their lives. So to see how incredibly worked up and tense she was, and to see all that emotion, and for her to essentially have panic attacks leading towards the end of the episode, all of it was just really, really well done. Sure, the show, maybe writing wise, some things are a little cringy and very soap opera-esque, I'm not taking this show as far as realism that seriously, because to me it's just a really fun, intense popcorn type romance thriller. But I do like that episode 3 ended on a cliffhanger, and then going into episode 4 as well really set things up really, really nicely. I'm hoping that there is more at play as far as who's trying to take down the male lead. I think there's 3 main folks that are in the principal cast that look really sus. There is, of course, the best friend from college who has ties to Hee-ju that the male lead is obviously clearly very triggered and jealous by. And those are where the lighter moments in episode 3 that I was enjoying, their kind of interaction and their kind of like their pissing dog contest between the two of them, while Hee-ju is kind of stuck there like, what the hell is going on? I think the right-hand man to the male lead on his team comes off really sus as well. And there's also obviously the case of the missing sister, who I think would have a lot more motivation as to why she wants to take him down, because we haven't really seen much of the sister or really gotten into her backstory, which is why I really appreciated episode 4, because it kind of puts things in a lot more perspective. For one, I really, really like the fact that we got to meet once again the mother-in-law and the father-in-law and see how tense that relationship is, and their ire and contempt isn't just directed at the daughter. It's not just directed at Hee-ju, it's directed at the male lead as well. And Park and how he deals with his father was very protective. I find that in general, he is a very cold and cruel character in some of the passing remarks he makes, but there's also a softness and a warmth to him as well. And I do like that some of his protective streaks were flaring up, and that you do see that spikes of jealousy. And through the flashbacks of episode 4 in particular, you definitely get to see that this wasn't just an arranged marriage, and it wasn't just, well, this was a sister that was left available to marry into this, media conglomerate, powerful family that we can join forces with to be this huge, wrecking ball in Korea. He obviously had feelings for her right from when they were really young as well, and just his interactions with her as a kid, because they've known each other for 20 plus years, right? Their family ties go really well back. And it showed just how cold and ruthless their family is, and why his behavior sometimes comes off really casually cruel, because that environment is extremely toxic. There's just in the family dynamic, there really isn't like a healthy patron there. Like, all of them suck to varying levels and degrees. They're just all awful. But I liked getting that little flashback and then seeing where some of that imposter syndrome and where that self-loathing for the female lead Hee-ju comes from, because Hong her sister was always the one that she was being compared to, and the family that the male lead comes from puts so much emphasis and stock on the two of them getting married. So her disappearing was absolutely the rug ripping out from underneath everyone, and it's put so much expectation on our female lead, and unfortunately she's failing in their eyes, and they were so brusque about it. The father-in-law in particular is definitely a piece of shit. So I'm really glad that in that moment the male lead was able to stick up and defend her honor and be like, you need to back up, get the hell out of here. Like, where do you get off throwing a friggin' wine glass? Like, are you okay? Like, get it together. I loved all of that. I also love that we got a lot more reveals. So as I was saying, in episode 3, it was getting obvious that the male lead was starting to catch wind of what was going on and getting an idea that Hong Hee-ju was able to speak and that she's been pulling this ruse for a long time. And I like that we got confirmation, especially in the epilogue for episode 4, that her entire freak out, crash out moment in the police car, in the police cruiser, after the whole resolution of her father being abducted, and in the dash cam revealing that she was screaming and that she was crying and she was yelling physically, "Get me out of here, get me out, like I need to breathe, I'm like claustrophobic, I'm freaking the hell out." And that the male lead was able to see all this happen, so undeniable proof that she's been able to speak. And that was kind of able to crystallize the final piece of evidence that he needed, that there was something off between some of the phone calls that he was receiving from this kidnapper. So he can now definitively say there is the actual kidnapper and stalker out there that is creating havoc on their lives, and that there was also his wife that was also involved in the ruse to some level, because he was able to piece together that she's been so incredibly unhappy and the pressure of being in this family has really gotten to her, and that she wants her exit out, and even verbalizes to her earlier in the episode, "I know you want to divorce me." And I love that. In hindsight, all the hints that he was dropping right up until the very last jaw-dropping moment where he actually physically catches her in the moment on that burner phone. What a powerful way to end the episode. And I love that they didn't have any dialogue exchange between them, and just kind of leaves everything for the imagination of the viewer going into episode 5. I freaking love that. And I love that it was obvious that it was going to happen, because Hee-ju was being so incredibly careless and clumsy, because she's completely in over her head with it, that I was like, how are you being this bad in concealing what you're doing? And the male lead hasn't caught on yet. So he has caught on, and he got the final puzzle pieces to crystallize everything together. There are so many good moments. One of the things that was really bothering me about their dynamic too was, even if we, the audience, knows that she doesn't actually still have the selective mutism and she's able to speak and express herself at will, the fact that he wasn't certain about that up until these recent events, and that all these years he was comfortable with communicating with her just through, written messages in her notebook or through her phone, and never bothering to learn at least a couple of choice phrases via sign language, was infuriating to me, because they're trying to sell that even with their cold and distant marriage, that there was feelings on both sides, definitely on his side, and that he absolutely wanted this to work out so that he could marry her. Because we also get the reveal in the episode that her sister was in contact with him prior to the date of the marriage, and that it was almost mutually agreed upon that she would disappear and that her sister could take place. I love that we got that reveal as well, and that the sister has come back into the picture, even though, again, we don't get that much with her. But one of the things that was really pissing me off is, why wouldn't he learn sign language? At the very bare minimum, just some usual ready common phrases at the very least. And you've been in a marriage with this woman for at least 3 to 4 years. You've known her for well over 20. Like, come on now, right? So I love that issue in particular came right to a head in episode 4. We got that showdown between the two of them as she was trying to be interviewed for the 2024 presidential speech language interpreter position, and how incredibly tense that was. And then he got to see, not only is she the best person for the job, period, but just seeing how obsessive she was going over every single tape of past press conferences that he's done, that she is so well versed in how he thinks and breathes and moves, that she can anticipate exactly what he's going to say, how he rolls his consonants, how he does physical cues. Like, she obsessively watched those tapes. And I love that we saw evidence of that in the prior 3 episodes, and that all came ahead to this, and that this is something that she's dreamed of. But it also showed her hand. It showed that she genuinely has an interest in her husband. She's genuinely so fascinated by him, and to a disturbingly obsessive degree was studying those tapes. And even in the small intimate moments of him kind of laying down beside her because he knew that she was hyped up and freaked out and crashing out over all these recent events, and made sure that they slept together at least initially so she could feel somewhat protected. And then you see little glances here and there of her staring at his lips and really watching every minute facial expression, and that he was able to find out through that interview just how deep it goes and how personally affected he's been by it, and that he actually started to feel some shame. I mean, we even got evidence of that in episode 3 with the way her like college friend was able to easily communicate with her through sign language, and he obviously felt really inadequate. And I love that it came ahead in episode 4, even with her putting it out there. I could teach you sign language. It's not that hard. And it would be much better for you to effectively do your job, especially if you hire me to be this official interpreter, but it also will help in communication during our relationship. And this was all kind of communicated in code between the two of them in this room with all these other spectators, and everybody else is looking like, what the hell is going on here? So everything that came about in episode 4 was great. I think the epilogue showing of the dash cam that revealed that he knew much sooner than she knew that she could talk, brilliant. But the last final scene of her almost at the ledge looking down at that tall building and him coming in that last second and them just kind of having that standoff, just brilliant stuff. I think the show is so much fun. I'm having such a great time with it. The 4 episodes went by like that. It's totally understandable why this is like the hottest show out right now in K-drama. I literally see everybody talking about it, everybody. You go anywhere online, anyone that you speak to that is an enthusiast for K-drama watching are talking about this goddamn show, and with good reason. The show is that good, and it pains me to know that I think it's gonna take like a 2-week hiatus in December. I think it's around December 14th. I need to get the official details for that, but I do know the show is taking a break. So I'm already like, oh, but it is such a great ride. I'm having such a good time. Let me know if you were able to make it all the way to the end of this podcast. Let me know your thoughts. If you're watching the video form of this recording, just let me know in the YouTube comment section, what are your thoughts? Have you been coming up with your theories of who is the big mastermind behind all the mayhem that's going down in the show? What do you think about the male and female leads relationship and the progress it's getting? Are you enjoying the chemistry? Even if we're dealing with really grade flawed characters, especially the male lead, he's not the golden retriever. He's not the perfect man. Like, he has definitely made a lot of mistakes, and there are times where he's cruel, but I am loving the chemistry between them. Their chemistry is fire. So I am there. If you're listening to the audio versions of this podcast via Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I really appreciate you as well. Please feel free to interact with those platforms as well. I would love to know your thoughts. Till the next one.